For this next tutorial, we're going to learn how to 3D model an apple using nurbs. So when we talk about nurbs in Maya, we will mostly be talking about 3D modeling by building up from first drawing a curve and then turning that into a surface. Nurbs is just a complete different modeling logic than polygonal modeling, which is what we've looked at so far. So for this next exercise, I want you to download the image of the apple that I added to the week 2 document. Once you have it downloaded, please open it up and copy it to your Maya project file. So here is my project folder. I'll double click here, and under the source images folder, you should be able to copy paste your apple image. So make sure it's in the source images folder under your Maya project folder. Once you have it there, you're going to go back into Maya, and if you're on your perspective view, you want to go open up your 4 viewports and move to a side view. And then under view, you're going to go down to image plane, import image. And if your Maya project folder is not set, remember you can go to set project and find where your project is located, and once you locate it, just click on set, and that way it's automatically gonna look for your apple image under this folder structure. So if I close this and then I try to do this again, if I go to view, image plane, import image, you should see that now it's gone automatically to my source images, and that's where my apple is located. So whenever you're going to use external images for references, they should be saved under your source images folder, because Maya will automatically choose that as the first place to look for these kinds of images. So go ahead and open your file, and what we have here is a reference image that we're going to use to draw a profile curve of this shape to eventually turn into a surface. So I'm going to move this image out of the way, and now I'm going to go to create curve tools and EP curve tool. So what we're going to do is we're going to select half of this apple because it's practically symmetrical, and we're going to draw its profile. So we're going to first start from the top, and with our mouse we're just going to click the first point of our curve, and then we're going to move our mouse to the next point and keep moving and clicking by copying this profile in the image. And then once we hit the bottom, our last point, we're just going to hit enter. And so now we've created a curve. We want to make sure that our top and our bottom end at the same parallel point, so that when we revolve this curve, it's kind of starting and ending at the same height. So to do this, we need to move our pivot point, which is right now located outside of our image. So we're going to select our curve, and we're going to right click and select control vertex. And this activates the points where we can control and edit our curve. So if we wanted to kind of add more detail, for example, we could go in and select certain vertices and then move them around. The problem is now that our pivot point is really far away from the points where we want to be working. So we need to move our pivot point into our work area. So again, remember, you're going to be working a lot of the time by moving your pivot points. So you should be used to working with the keyboard by now and hitting D in order to move your pivot point around. And then DV again snaps it to a certain point. Okay, so now that our profile is much closer to what the actual image is, again, we wanted to have this vertice and this one end at the same height. So in order to do that, we want to select, so in order to do that, we want to select the bottom one and then shift select the top one. We want to snap our pivot to that point, either the top or the bottom point. And then we're going to hit R for scale. And we're going to drag the points until they're parallel. Once we're done, we can go back to selecting the curve, and this will take it out of the vertex mode. And now we're going to hide our image. To hide this image, we can hit Control H on our keyboard, and this will hide it. So now we have the profile of our apple. Let's go back to perspective mode. And once we're in perspective mode, let's select this curve, and then in our menu, we're going to make sure you're under the modeling tab, and then you're going to go to surfaces, revolve. So what just happened, I'm going to undo this so you can see. What happened is that since my pivot point is not located in the edges of my apple profile, it's actually using this as a center to which it's going to do the revolve function. That's why it looks like that. So if I redo this function, see, it took that profile, but it actually revolved it around this center. So let's undo this. And again, we need to move our pivot point. So if I go to modify center pivot point, so let's move our pivot point. I'm going to hit W so that I'm on the move function, and D and V to snap my pivot point to the center point from where I want to have this profile do the revolve function. Once I have it correctly located, I'm going to go again to surfaces, revolve. And this time it's worked. So if your geometry looks black, if it's shaded black, all you need to do is go back to surfaces and hit reverse direction, and this will flip your geometry. What happened is that it kind of modeled it inward, and we want to flip almost like the skin of the geometry outwards. So you should have something that looks sort of like this. So now let's go ahead and go to select our Apple profile and go to modify and center pivot again so that it's centered. Once we have it centered, let's go ahead and freeze these transformations so that this becomes 0 location for our apple. Now we want to scale it down quite a lot. We can go ahead and hide our curve since we don't need it anymore. So let's go ahead and hit Control H, and we're only going to be working with this surface now. So let's bring it closer to our table. And again, I'm going to go back to this viewport mode and bring it up. I want to scale my apple down by a lot. Maybe it should be about this big. So this looks about right. You could always go back in by right-clicking into Control Vertex, and you could edit these vertex points, but it's a complete different 3D modeling logic than the polygonal modeling that we've been doing. So what I recommend is, if you're gonna work with NURBS and with curves, you should make sure your curve has the right profile first before you revolve it. Because once you turn it into a surface, it's much harder to edit and modify its shape. But you can still do it. For example, here, if you go to Control Vertex and select this, again, we have this pivot point we need to move and center. And then we can go ahead and like push this top down a bit. Etc. Now I want you to go back and, with everything you've learned so far, think of a way to model the stem for your apple.